Welcome to Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Coelho, and Caritas is dedicated to promoting the evolution of consciousness as the key to individual growth and global healing. We do this through online interviews and presentations by guest speakers, classes, and also study groups. We draw from a wide assortment of both ancient wisdom and leading edge studies in science, consciousness, spirituality, and philosophy. We've been doing this for the past 18 years, going on 19. In 2019, though, we began recording our presentations. Our video recordings are viewable through our website, caritascenter.org, and on our YouTube channel, Caritas Consciousness Project. As a nonprofit organization, we do rely on the support of our members and donors to keep our program going. If you enjoy our presentations and would like to support this program, you can make a donation or become a member on our website. And membership start at just $10 a month, and you get benefits. So check it out. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. Cathie Stivers is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister with a PhD in health education. After a 16-year career in public health education, Cathie attended Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, Virginia, and completed her Master of Divinity degree in 2002. She then served as a chaplain at the Children's Hospital in Richmond for 11 years. During that time, she was introduced to the Indigenous ways of being at Stephen Jenkinson's Orphan Wisdom School, which is orphanwisdom.com, if you want to check that out. And she attended that for 3 years. And building upon that experience, she received mentoring from Mayan elder Carlos Barrios and other spiritual guides in the Barrios family. And she has conducted extensive study of the writings of Martin Prechtel, Malidoma Patrice Sommet, Jamie Sams, Joseph Ryle, Serge Kahili King, Vladimir Maigret, hope I'm saying that right, and more. She is the author of Reviving Our Indigenous Souls, How to Practice the Ancient to Bring in the New. And this is that book. And it's really very good. It's really, I'm enjoying it very much. It's got so much that speaks to my heart that I'm really finding it wonderful to read. In progress is A Weaver's Guide to Becoming Fully Human, a workbook companion to Reviving Our Indigenous Souls. So that should be good. In recent years, Cathie has been learning and practicing the skills of spiritually based emotional clearing in her work with polarity integration, yin-yang, examining beliefs that either inhibit or promote self-evolution and multi-dimensional consciousness and understanding and honoring relationships with self, levels of consciousness, and with others, soul contracts. And her website is indigenoussoulrevival.com. All one word, indigenoussoulrevival.com. Okay, and I hope you all have the 2 handouts that Cathie asked me to send. Good. Sharon has it. And I'll ask you all to keep on your, just mute yourselves while Cathie is presenting, and anytime you're not asking a question, so that there's no background noise. And let me see here. I just want to get back to there. Okay. And if you ask a question and you don't have your video on, I would, or at least a photo of yourself, if you only have a black screen with your name, then I'll ask you to just put your question in the chat and we will read it, because on the recording, it doesn't look good if you have, they put in this horrible picture of a camera. So if you're asking a question and you don't have your video on, please just put it in the chat and we'll read it. Okay. And now, Cathie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. So welcome. And it's really a pleasure to be among you folks virtually, and to share some of what I've learned and written about, and to discuss more about it. So I look forward to our time together this evening. Well, you've heard my bio. I'm glad. Thank you, Gloria, for going over that, so I didn't have to do it. And but you may have noticed a trajectory of my path. And I'll call it all my spiritual path, because everything that you do in your life contributes to your spiritual path. But from my deep interest, first of all, as a professional, I guess, in personal health. And I always was, in college, I just wanted to learn everything I could about about the body, about our bodies, and how they work and how we take care of them. And then the shift to community and public health, to expand on those ideas for communities. And then the shift into more of a spiritual focus of my journey as I move from higher education into ministry. And following my completion at the seminary, I started work I was a chaplain at the Children's Hospital, and it's the place where I was it's a pediatric long-term care center. And so I was a chaplain there for 11 years, and just monumental time of my life, just some great experience, some very sad things and some very just exquisitely beautiful things, and everything in between. So it was just a rich time. And it was actually during my chaplaincy years that I was first introduced to this sort of indigenous way of thinking and being in the world. And this was first by Stephen Jenkinson at his Orphan Wisdom School, and then subsequently by his mentor, Martine Prechtel, who is a Mayan shaman. And then later, I picked up on the writings of Malidoma Patrice Somé, who's an African shaman, and the Barrios family of shamans from Guatemala, and other indigenous voices. And I just drank it all in. I just drank it all in. And all of these teachers and influences have informed me about, among other things, what causes the death of cultures, and consequently, the inability of individuals to know themselves, to learn who they are, to learn who we are, why we're born, where we came from, and who or what we return to after we die. Now, why is that sentence in there? That speaks to ancestry and the indigenous emphasis on the importance of ancestors, and the absolute belief and understanding and living the truth of that our ancestors accompany us all the time. And that was one of the first and biggest and most satisfying lessons or facts that I experienced at the Orphan Wisdom School. And it was from that point on, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in this world. I have my whole ancestry with me all the time. And they are a breath away on the other side of the veil, being ancestors, being elders on the other side of the veil. And it just made a phenomenal difference in my life. So this is where Stephen, I think, got the name for his school. When cultures are destroyed, or allowed to die, but in most cases they're destroyed, and leaving individuals to now wonder who they are as people. then we become orphans, and we're wandering around trying to figure out who we are and who we belong to, who we are and whose we are. And so the last 10 years of my life have been dedicated to sort of, and using that analogy of orphan, is finding my birth parents, is finding my birthplace, my birth parents, my birth people, my birth culture. And that's, it's been just extremely satisfying. And to find out why I came here to Earth at this time, in this particular incarnation. And so this led eventually to this fascination and this just, I just embodied it, or I remembered it, right? It's an ancient memory, all this that I was learning is going, it just resonated with me. And I was like, oh, this is just so true, so true, so true. And I don't think my friends and family know this. They've got to know how good this feels and how real this is. And so that's kind of what fueled me writing and publishing this book, Reviving Our Indigenous Souls. And it was published in 2016. So this evening, I will talk about the book, and I'll highlight the template I used to teach from it, called The Fabric of Our Indigenous Souls. And that's the handouts that you were sent. And we're going to spend some time with those. So here's the progression I'll follow. First, I'll talk about what's Indigenous soul. What is an Indigenous soul? And define that. And then I'll talk about how this book came to be, the Reviving Our Indigenous Souls, how that book came to be. I'll give a brief overview of the book, what's in it and how it can be used. And then I'll talk a little bit about how the fabric template came to be and what it means. And I'll take you on a guided tour on how it works. I'm going to walk you through that template, that fabric, so that you can use it for yourself and see how it works for you and how it relates to human multi-dimensionality. And then I'll close with a couple of points of why I think this book and the fabric template are so important right now. And then we'll have Q&A. So that's sort of the pattern we'll follow. So Indigenous soul, what does that mean? Well, as I wrote in the presentation description, Indigenous refers not only to cultures and peoples, but also a way of being. The Indigenous way is the embodied ancient memory. That's really important. Embodied ancient memory of how to be fully human. And it's encoded in our souls, no matter who our ancestors are. And I'd like to read a little bit from the book that elaborates on that I think expands on that definition. Indigenous. Okay, so I'm going to cue you in. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, but one of the things that provided a lot of the information and the outline for this book was a skill that Stephen Jenkinson teaches all of his students, and that is look up words. Look up not just their definition, but look up the origins of them. Look up what they originally meant. And that you can do is called etymology, etymology, etymology. And to look up the origin of the word and its original meaning. It'll tell you a lot. And sometimes words still hold the same original meaning, and sometimes they've really drifted. So it can be very informative to you. So that's what I did. It really drove the research process of this book. So Indigenous literally means, when you look up the etymology, it literally means inborn. So it points more towards something that is born within than it does to where someone or something is born. And it comes from the original root, which means to give birth, to beget. So that's what Indigenous means. And soul, its original root words and meaning meant spiritual and emotional parts of a person, the animate existence of life or living being. So basically, the Indigenous soul is that spirit and animus, that animation, that aliveness that is born in us, no matter who your ancestors are. And Martin Prechtel, the Mayan shaman, that's Stephen Jenkinson's major mentor, he's got many, but through his writings, Martin Prechtel refers to, he coined that phrase, indigenous soul. And he describes it as the most ancient and most original part of everything and everyone, which remembers its true nature and lives it in coherence with all of creation. So everything that is alive has a soul, and it's indigenous. It's in there. It's born in there. So those who are still called indigenous people today are the ones who have maintained that balance and who have remained successful in honoring their indigenous souls and have maintained their balanced lifestyle that is in sync with nature. Most of us in the 21st century have forgotten what it looks like to live indigenously, but we all have the capacity to do so because we all have an indigenous soul, and each one of us has one, and it's in there stirring and saying, remember, remember. So every human being has an indigenous soul, no matter who his or her ancestors are. Everybody's got one. And when I felt that truth in my bones, I came alive in a new way like never before. And so it not only informed this book and was the context for this book, it really gave a lot of meaning to me. And here's what it means to me as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman of Western European descent. It means that I have both the freedom and the responsibility to be genuinely indigenous without the risk of co-opting any particular practices of what we refer to as indigenous cultures. It means I don't have to be Native American or Polynesian or Hawaiian or African in order to practice indigenous ways. And further, that I have the responsibility to not try to be who I'm not try to be Native American or African or any of these, but to be genuinely who I am. And that's just such good news, isn't it? That we all have one and we can do this. So anyway, I'm just jazzed. So that's what indigenous soul is. So how did this book come to be? Well, I think it was in 2015, I accompanied my partner on her business trip to Phoenix, and she was in meetings all day for 3 days. And while she was there, I sequestered myself in a hotel room, in the hotel room to write my own job description. I was so excited about all this that I was learning about. And I said, I have to share this. How am I going to do this? Stand on a street corner and hey. I mean, how am I going to do this? So I was like, I knew so I had learned so much from that. I wanted to spread the word, and I knew I wouldn't find what I wanted to do in any job search. So I knew I'd have to create my own job description. I said, just write your own job description. Then at the very least, you'll be real clear on who you are and what your purpose is and what you specifically want to do. Because if you can't articulate it, you're not going to be able to share this with others. So that's what I did. And at the end of the 3 days, sticky notes all over the wall and this and planning and all this stuff. And I had this whole outline. And I realized that at the 11th hour of the third day that I had not written a job description, but indeed had written an outline for a book. Funny how the spirit works. So I started to write a book on ritual because that's what the emphasis of what I wanted to do was about. But within a couple of months of writing on that, I stopped and discerned. I said, wait, this is not the first book. This is a later book. The first book is the book I was supposed to write first was one about a variety of practices, ritual being one of them, that needed to be introduced in like an overview fashion before I could delve deeply into any of these practices. And so that's when I started writing Reviving Our Indigenous Souls. So the format of this book, here's a brief overview. I know at least two of you are familiar with this book. There are 32 chapters in the book. The good news is they're all short. 31 of the 32 are verbs. And the verbs describe timeless practices for reviving one's indigenous soul. And collectively, all those verbs, they capture what it means to be fully human. And I'm going to give you a sneak preview if you on one of the handouts that you have, the one that looks like this. All the verbs are down the side. Okay. And I'll talk more about where those verbs came from. They were downloaded. So every chapter except one is a verb. And then the book also includes texts and illustrations that describe the interplay of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of one's indigenous soul at work in the body. So there's a lot of visuals about the chakras and subtle bodies and auras in the auric fields of the human body. There's a table comparison of third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension characteristics. And there's a visual of one of the Mayan calendars actually is based on coordinates in the body. So one of the Mayan calendars is woven into the body. It's built on the joints and locations in the human body. So those are some examples. And then at the conclusion of each chapter, there are cues for further reflection. So there's some reflection things. How has this, specific things about this verb in your life? Have you ever thought about this or this or this? Have you ever had a situation where this that applies to that verb? And then also that's followed by some suggestions on how to practice that particular verb. So if time permits, this evening during Q&A or whenever, I'll be happy to share one of the shortest chapters just to give you an idea of what they look like. They range from 2 pages to 5. I'll pick a 2-pager if we have time. So that's sort of the format of the book. Now, what's that got to do with the fabric template, and how did that come to be? And what does it mean, this fabric thing that we're going to be looking at, or that you've already looked at? Well, the book was published in January 2018, and I spent the next probably 6 months giving numerous presentations on it. And I taught my first class that summer, and it was a pilot test to see how it went. And it was, we met once a week for 4 weeks for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours tops. And I discovered after the first session, and as I was preparing for the second session, it really hit me that the book had so much interrelated information with a handful of major ideas that were all related to this collection of verbs that was difficult to teach it without a theoretical model of some kind, a template, a frame, because it felt like we were just kind of picking fruit. So it's like, how does all this go together? And that's how this template came about. I knew how it all fit together because I visualized, I knew it, I wrote it, I knew how it all went together, but we needed a picture. And so it was difficult for me to teach it. It was difficult for them to grasp it all. And so I identified the major themes of the book that I hoped the reader would understand as they read the book. And then I asked myself, well, how do I illustrate the relationship of those themes with all these verbs? And I like making tables. And that's what I did. And to show the intersection or the integration of things. And that's the format I came up with. And the themes that I came up, the major themes that are kind of holding all these verbs together, mingled, are the titles of these columns. And we're going to go over them in a little more detail. And the verbs are listed, like I said, down the side. And these comprise the chapters of the book. Now, these verbs were not just randomly or arbitrarily chosen, nor were they arbitrarily ordered. They were very intentionally selected from my readings and from some of them came right to me. I remember at work during lunch writing down 6 or 8 verbs that just came to me. That one, that one, that one, that one. And so some of them were very instantaneous to me. And then others came a little slower, but they were downloaded. And that's kind of how I came up with them. And then I ordered them. They're somewhat chronological, following the growth and development of a human being from birth to death. And so they're somewhat organized in that order. So, for example, the first verb is breathe. And that's the first thing we learn when we come out of the womb from a water environment to an air environment. So as I looked at this template and this table, I remembered Stephen Jenkinson once using the analogy with us of the warp and weft of fabrics. And that's when this image of fabric came to me, and the understanding of the fact that we are weavers of our own lives. We are weavers of our own destinies. And so this notion of fabric and weaving these things together, and the warp and weft of fabric was a perfect analogy and a perfect image. So that's how this structure came about. So the warp factors, they're the ones that run vertically. So you can think about fence posts. Fence posts are staggered, and they're there to offer the structure and the strength and the foundation, the skeleton for the wire to run across. And that's exactly what the warp and weft of a fabric does as well. It happens in music also. The bass or the drum beat keeping the foundation of the song, and then the harmonies and the melodies. And so the warp fibers, the ones running vertically, are the foundational ones, and the weft are across. So the themes are the foundations that hold this whole context of the book together, and the verbs interplay to greet and emphasize each of those themes. So they're related in that way. So I'll pause here to see if you have any questions on that template. Does that make sense? And if you have any questions on the template so far, before we go into the column headings. And how do I call on you? Oh,
I don't see anyone's hand up. Or
Sharon?
You don't even have to raise your hand.
Okay.
If Cathie asks for questions, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. Sharon, do you have a question?
Yeah, Natalie, did you have one too?
Oh, I didn't.
No. My question is, are you going to talk about the one word that isn't a verb? You mentioned.
Yes, thank you for that segue.
Yeah.
The one word that the one chapter that is not a verb is called word. So you actually named it. And I'm going to go into that, but it's based on the etymology. That's one of the foundational warp fibers is as a tool, the etymology, to look up the original meanings, origins and meanings of words. And so that first chapter is about word and the importance of that. So good question.
Mm-hmm. Natalie, did you have a question? No. Okay.
Okay. So now let's look at the fabric and how it works. So I'm actually, before I go into all these column titles, I'm going to you are my students now in the class, and I'm going to have you look at this other handout that's got squares at the top. And if you don't have a hard copy, if you just have, does everybody have access to seeing it? Either a copy that you have on, like, on your screen or paper. We all good? Okay. So if you don't have it on as a hard copy on paper, just grab a piece of paper and you can draw on there, because I'm going to have you draw. I'm going to have you draw a little bit. So all right. In these boxes up here, in this first box that's sort of eventually above the word process and inner work, I want you to draw a stick figure, just a stick figure with the halo. And for real, nobody's going to see this because you're in your own space. So it only has to make sense to you. Okay. And the next one, I want you to draw the, where it says polarity integration. So in the second box, I want you to, you know, the yin yang symbol. Mm-hmm. Everybody familiar with the yin yang symbol? It looks sort of like this. I wish I had one. But at least, do you know what I'm talking? Does everybody know what that is? That's, yeah.
I think everyone does.
Okay. All right. That's an assumption I didn't want to make, but I'm sure. Okay. So the yin yang symbol. Okay. In the next box, I want you to draw a dollar sign. And in the next box, so we're talking 1, 2, 3, the fourth one over, is to draw a wavelength. You know, if you think about a frequency, like a radio wavelength or the next one, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth box, I want you to draw a hot air balloon. Mm-hmm. A hot air balloon. Only you have to know what it is. And the next to the last box, I want you to just write this brief sentence. Words are alive. Words are alive. And the last box we'll leave empty right now. You'll do something with that when we finish with these other boxes. Okay? So here's why I had you draw these pictures. They're to illustrate or symbolize what each of these columns are, which are the warp fibers. Don't worry so much about the process, skills, context, tool, and goal, but look underneath there. So the first one is inner work. And the reason I had you draw the stick figure with the halo is to emphasize that humans are physical and spiritual. Human beings are, well, we've heard this sentence, I mean, I don't know how many times, but we are spiritual beings in a physical body. But it's very important to always remember that we are spirit-filled and soul-filled. And so if we're talking about Indigenous soul, this stick figure is a human body that is divine also. And this notion challenges us to think of things in ways that when we're doing inner work and examining what that means and what we're capable of and what we're here to do. This is where we can look at our belief systems and think of things in ways that we hadn't thought of before. And there are lots of, there's sections of the book that help us do this inner work. And it's starting with those existential questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? What am I doing here? And where do I go from here? And really delving into that process and more. And there's a lot of the reflections and practices at the end of each chapter really help you do that inner work about yourself and learning about yourself and remembering all those things. So that's a lifetime job. That's a lifetime homework assignment, right? Inner work. So that's a major theme. Another major theme, the next one, polarity integration. I had you draw the yin-yang symbol. And the polarity integration is very essentially is taking what seem to be two opposites and looking at them as interdependent, and they're like two sides of the same coin, basically. And in the book, I share the story about the grandfather, Native American, with his grandson, and they're sitting around the campfire, and the grandfather is imparting his wisdom to his grandson. And he tells his grandson, there are two wolves in my belly. There are two wolves in my belly. And they are constantly interacting with each other, constantly in conflict or facing each other. And one is a black wolf, and he can turn on you in an instant, and he's very survival oriented, and he'll very protective, and he'll do anything to keep alive, and he'll go after something that he feels is threatening. And he doesn't take any bull, and he's just that's the dark wolf, aggressive. And then there's the white wolf that's very, very passive, very kind, very loving, sees everything in a positive way, and just would do anything for you. And each one of them, they're just in conflict all the time. And I feel them wrestling in my belly all the time. And I don't know. I just struggle with that all the time. And the son and the grandson says, well, which one's going to win? And the grandfather says, whichever one I feed. And that's the story that I've always heard, and it ended right there. But here's the rest of the story. The grandson says, well, which one are you going to feed? And the grandfather says, well, I have to feed both of them. I have to feed both of them because there are times when I need that dark wolf for protection. And there are times when I need that light wolf for kindness and unconditional love and compassion and tenderness. So I have to feed them both. If I feed one over the other, if I feed the white wolf and say, because everything's all good and light, the dark wolf, when he gets to starving, he's going to eat that white one. And if I only feed the dark one, then the white one will die, and I will not be a whole person, and I will not be fit to be around. That's the yin yang. That's the polarity integration. And basically that is humanity's, in this age of humanity, this is our assignment to say, find a way to find the benefit of the dark as it companions with the light. The light and the dark have to dance together. So that's a really important one, polarity integration. the next one for power management, I had you draw a dollar sign. And the reason I had you do that was that is probably the one symbol that we could identify as the universal symbol of power. And so it's kind of like, money is energy. Everything is. And that is our premier sign of power in our culture. And so I liken this to when we have the power management is how we manage our own power. How are we spending our energy account? How are we balancing our energy checkbook sufficiently to where we're not giving out so much energy that we don't have enough for ourselves, nor are we hoarding all the energy and not assisting others? Where are we spending our energy on a day-to-day basis that is worthwhile to our soul evolution? So think of the power management as a checking account of grace. That's what Carolyn Mays calls it. The density, I had you draw a wavelength. So probably most of you know, like I said, everything is energy. Everything has a vibration. And so the wavelengths, and you think about radio and FM and AM, microwaves, all the color waves. And this new age that we're entering into is about raising our wavelength, our frequency, our vibration level to become lighter, literally and figuratively, to move up the bandwidth to those higher frequencies. And it is literally a physical thing, as well as a spiritual thing. And dimension, I had you draw a hot air balloon. Probably most of us. I don't know who all is on here. Maybe not most of us. Okay, my age. Age of Aquarius. The fifth dimension, the group that sang, "How would you like to ride in my beautiful balloon?" It's the age of Aquarius. And this is about dimensions where we're rising to a different dimension because of our higher vibration rate. So density is how fast or slow we're vibrating, our frequency is. And dimension is basically the location of where those frequencies are, the location where a certain frequency is compatible. And we talk a lot about how to do that. And there's a whole appendix on the third, fourth, and fifth dimensions, raising to a higher dimension, and how you can do that through the use of these verbs. So that's why I've used the symbology there. And then the last one where I had you write, words are alive. Words help us remember who we are. Words as part of language is a part of culture. And so words help us remember who we are, and they're a basic part of our evolution in our culture. And so that's one key point. And the sound each word makes is a wavelength. It's a frequency. And so it too is alive. Words are alive in the sounds that they make. And their meanings have power and information. And even the letters in each word have their own origins and frequencies. So there's just so much history and information and frequency and vibration within words. So all of these, until we get to the last one that's called ascension, the goal is ascension, are the warp. These are the major themes that I want the reader to get out of the book as they're reading through these verbs. You've got to do inner work. Polarity integration is one of the biggest things to work on, and you can't do that without doing inner work. Managing your own power. Achieving a higher frequency so that you can ascend to a higher dimension to live multi-dimensionally. And using etymology as a tool, as just one tool, to inform us of what these verbs mean and convert them into action. So ascension is the last. In that last box, if you drew an arrow from all of these other ones over to that last box. That would illustrate how all of those things contribute to, all together, and incorporating the verbs, contribute to ascension. And what is ascension? Ascension is basically living multi-dimensionally. You move up into be able to vibrate at a higher frequency and be able to function sort of in several dimensions at once, third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, at any given moment. And the book goes into this in a lot more detail. There's a whole table that compares the characteristics of third dimension, fourth dimension, and fifth dimension. So ascension really is being able to do that within our own bodies, so we don't have to leave the body to do it. That's what's pretty cool. It's kind of like, I heard somebody call it like resurrection in your body. Yeah. So you become Christ-like without having to leave your body. You basically turn on more things in your body that go, I didn't know I could do that. So I liken it to, and I give the analogy in the book about when you buy a new computer and you get, with whether it's got all the bells and whistles or not, you come home with a brand new computer and it's all charged up and you're ready to go. And if you're like me, I know 2% of what all it can do when I bring it home. And it'll take me 10 years to figure out what all this computer can do. It can do everything but your laundry. That's kind of the analogy I use about our bodies. And that's what this soul evolution journey is we're like that new computer. We have to learn what all we can do. And that's the ascension role of moving up into dimensions. Let me tap back into this. So so in summary, the complementary use of the book with that goes through all the verbs and the illustrations of what dimensions mean and the comparisons of them with this fabric template, that's our guide. Those are tools to help us achieve and recognize and fulfill our multi-dimensionality of ourselves. So before I close with why these tools are important, I want to know if you have any questions about this template or anything that we've talked about so far. Any clarifications or questions that you have about that?
I have a question.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So we, what are the blocks under the process, skills, context, and tool and goal? What are those blocks for?
The empty ones?
Yeah, the empty ones.
Yes.
Now that we've drawn our pictures.
Right. So that's, if you took, then the verbs would go here.
Oh.
Yep, the verbs would go here, and you could look at one verb at a time and go, how does this verb help me do inner work? How does this verb help me, help me with my own power management? And you do that with each of the verbs. This book will last you a lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so. Does that help?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Sharon?
Yeah, I was wondering if the concept words are alive. Do you have any thoughts on how that relates to numerology, or in your mind, is there any connection?
Yes, there's definitely a connection. Yes. I know enough about numerology to make me really dangerous, but I know based in general what it is, that there's frequencies to numbers too, of course. And so there's patterns in letters and numbers, and what you could also say codes that emerge from those patterns. And so the mere arrangement of the frequency of an 8 next to the frequency of a 2 is going to give exude a different vibration and meaning if you're attuned to it. I'm not that good, but I write about it in the book where I talked about a dream I had when I was in seminary in my Hebrew class, when we were studying ancient Hebrew and learning how to read it and translate passages from the Old Testament. And I dreamt that I was working on the translation and the Hebrew letters on the page started dancing. And I was like, gosh, and, rubbing my eyes and looking again, and they just kept dancing. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on here? Oh, my classmates won't believe this. Oh my gosh. And then they spoke to me and said, oh, you like this? I mean, they were doing like the Rockettes, they were just kicking up their legs and they were dancing. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. Oh, you like this? They said, one of them said that to me. And I said, I love it. And then they said, well, if you like what you see here, wait till you see what's behind us. And then the dream ended. So it's just, that was like, I'm a believer. Okay, they're alive. Uh-huh. And there's people who are really good at reading that energy and reading the energy of letters and numbers. Yeah. That's a good question. Thank you.
Eleni.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Cathie. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to tell you that I am very excited. I don't know how I managed to last minute sign up for this, and I'm very excited, but because I'm in the middle of a big project on etymology,
uh-huh.
and my practice my embodied practice has so much to do with energy coursing through the body, and movement, and what you're speaking to. I'm just like, I'm meeting. I'm how can I say this? I hear you, and I'm with you. So many things that you have spoken so far is like, but wait a minute, I'm researching this, but wait a minute, I'm researching that. I just want to say I'm grateful. There is no question here, but I was wondering if there was, if in this research there was a calling for me to be in contact with you, would that be a possibility? Or not? I don't know. Maybe I'll ask Gloria.
Okay. Well, my website, if you go to my website, there's a way that you can contact me through there.
Okay. Wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question about ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
When Indigenous cultures speak about ancestors, is that limited to family ancestors, or is that the spirit world, the higher spirits as a whole? Mm-hmm. Because we have guides who are not necessarily family ancestors, although many times they are,
mm-hmm.
But not necessarily. So I always wonder that when they talk about the ancestors, is it just one family line that each person, celebrates and honors, or could it be any spirit who wants to help that person who is available?
That's a really good question. My perception is that it is maybe somewhere in between, where it may be a family line for sure, like clan, mm-hmm. or the name of what clan you're in could be that broad and not just a particular, what I would say that the Smith family or the
mm-hmm.
And it may be even bigger than a clan. It may be a tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So but definitely the immediate of the bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then there is also recognition that there are other spirit guides as well, and they may not have been in our family. It may have been a different clan. It may have been a different, maybe not even human. The Kachinas of the Pueblo people, the Zuni and the Hopi people. Those are spirit guides of a sort. What we see those Kachina dolls. So that they are in the mix of who helps them from the other side of the veil as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, because in Spiritism, which I teach, is it teaches us that we have a personal guide who's with us, from birth till death, like a guardian angel type person. Yeah. And then we also have work guides. So if I'm a writer, for instance, I'll have guides who are experts in writing who will help me with that. If I'm a musician, I'll have, musician spirits who help me with that. Whatever our field is, yes. We have work guides who help us.
Yes. Isn't that amazing?
And they're not necessarily ancestors, like
yes.
family
yes.
line.
Right.
Yeah. Right. That's what I was wondering.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for expanding on that too. Mm-hmm. And I think in the indigenous, what we call the indigenous cultures who are more earth-based in their thinking, that they also get what they call animal medicine. So the animals and trees and stones are spirit guides as well. And so they would, and kin, they would call them kin. These are my brothers and sisters, the winged ones, the winged ones, the finned ones, the leafed ones. So it's fascinating how your host on the other side of the veil is so expansive,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'll close, and then we can go into more Q&A if you'd like. So why are these tools important now? One big reason that I think these are important now is these recommended practices, the verbs, are ancient. And when you look up the etymology of that is a fabulous word. That is just packed with meaning that just all goes like this. It's just a portrait. And when you look etymologically, the term ancient has so much in it that it links the past, the present, and the future all together. It includes what has come before the past, what has marked us. It's almost like it's autographed us. What has come from in the past now is part of us. It's marked us. So it moves past into the present. What accompanies us, present, and what follows moves present into future as what follows as consequence, which pertains to past, present, and future. So you can't split them apart. It's all in that word, ancient. And so in that regard, these practices are timeless. They're good for any human being, anytime. They were good in the past. They're good now. They're good for the future. They're good to practice now to help bring in the future. They informed us in the present from the past. I mean, it's just, you can't split them apart. So they're timeless. And then I think another reason that these tools are so important, so they're good for all times. They're good right now. I think it's very timely for these on two counts. And one is we are in the age of Aquarius. We're in the balloon. We are in the age of Aquarius now. We are in the early phases of the golden age of humanity, the Great Awakening. We are in the time that has been prophesied for thousands of years. It's here. We're in it now. The news is not covering it, but we are in the early part of it, and it is unfolding. And this unprecedented evolution of humanity is underway. So the book and the template are especially useful at this time. I have felt like this book has been like a, I don't know, owner's manual that I should have been born with. So it's just good. It's really good to have right now. Another reason that I think these practices are very timely in their guidance on how to become fully multi-dimensionally human, and is as the option of, well, just technology in general. Now we've for the better part of a century, we've been considering the benefits and risks of technology, and that continues today. And we have so much advanced technology, and we are surrounded by artificial intelligence in every form. Our computers, I'm using artificial intelligence. We all are right now. So it's just wrapped all around us and in our homes, and it's just surrounding us. And the technology and artificial intelligence, and just the technology that's available now is the most advanced it's ever been. And I think we have to be even more aware of how we may rely on technology so much to take the place of what we can do for ourselves. And I don't mean like a robot driving my car. I don't have a problem with that. I'd rather read anyway. But in terms of technology that is maybe giving me readings on my body and saying, you have this, this, and this, where I'm not opposed to that, but I also want to be able to know my own body and know when something is wrong. I'm just using that as an example. So that we don't end up relying so much on technological advances so that we lose our knowledge of ourselves. And this technology is on the borderline of being invasive, can be, in our bodies, as well as in our minds. I mean, there's the whole topic of virtual realities, that we have to be ever aware of what's real. Which reality am I going to believe in? And I don't know if this is making sense, but it's I'm opening a Pandora's box, but it's something that we really need to really pay close attention to.
Well, I think that when I read about scientists and biologists talking about using AI to enhance our intelligence, that worries me, because invasively, because I think that what they're not in touch with is the potential that we have as human beings to enhance our own wisdom and intelligence. But if we have so many faculties that we don't even sometimes know we have, and that we haven't developed. It's been demonstrated with things like remote viewing, which the CIA has demonstrated in their Stargate program, and many others, clairvoyance and clairsentience and all of these things we have the capacity for.
Yes.
But we stopped believing in it because it was dangerous. And because, there were forces that didn't want us to have them.
Yes.
And so I think we should develop our inherent faculties and not be relying on computers, or what computers are great.
Yeah.
And a lot of, as you said, a lot of technology is wonderful. And a lot of it, unfortunately, we haven't developed our maturity, our emotional and spiritual and moral maturity in order to use it wisely. And so sometimes we use it destructively and even self-destructively.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I think we have to focus more on our own inner development before trying to enhance it through technology.
Yeah, it's the same general question we've had for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as new technology comes in, it's like, wow, what's the benefits? Wow, what are the risks? Ooh, you know, and I feel like the ones that were, because everything, there is so much technology in there, and we rely on I got an iPad, a computer, a smartphone,
Yeah,
you know, and I do rely on it. And so it's great. But if someone asked me what my brother's phone number was, I wouldn't be able to tell them. Oh, I have to look it up. It's right here. Or what I believe about a certain thing, if I'm relying on what particular information sources tell me and particular realities that are prominent, but not a reality that I typically believed in, then I may kind of get sucked into that reality that's not good, that's not healthy, or that compromises me somehow as a human being, that makes me less. And like you were saying, Gloria, about we aren't computers, but we are like that new computer that we don't know what all it can do. And this is the age where we're going to grow into it. And we just have to be aware and ready and say, yeah, I want to grow into me. I want to grow into me.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good time. I think the book and this template are very timely for now, for that reason.
I agree.
So that's, as I've stated before, we've got everything we need as humans. We've got everything inside of us and outside of us in the natural environment to evolve into these multidimensional beings that we were born to be. And we're at a critical juncture in humanity's evolution. This is an unprecedented time in human history. We are facing a sort of a leap in evolution, not a leap, but a kind of a march into a new, into a higher frequency and a higher dimension of ourselves that has never happened to human beings. This is new. And we're here, and we chose to be here for this day. I'm glad you're here. Yes.
Likewise.
It's an amazing time to be alive. It's an amazing time. Scary, but it's amazing. Yeah.
Cathie, well, I believe all that is true. And I try to view and read things that uplift my spirit and help me grow. And yet it truly is easy to get dragged down by the events of the day. And all, if we have any compassion in us, we ache for a lot that's going on in the world. And so I wonder if you could comment on that. And also, I mean, one of the easy things is don't watch the news. Well, that's kind of hard for me anyway, too. Although I don't, just consume it endless hours a day. But That's my issue.
Yes, yes. This is what helps me a lot. Is one of my teachers these days has taught us about the 100th floor view, and I used to call it the panoramic view. So back way up, if you right up in front of something like this, and this is what it looks like, and this is what it is. But the more we back up and get a wide angle lens, we can put it in perspective. And so I would try that first. And her analogy was go to the 100th floor. You can see a lot more from the 100th floor than you can from the first floor, and the 20th floor, and the 50th floor. So that's an analogy in general, is a little trick for something that's coming up, and you go, okay, okay. What's the bigger picture here? So that's one little tool. The other big thing that helps me, remember I said, and I talk about this in the book, that these things have been prophesied. This time that we're in has been prophesied by many indigenous groups for thousands of years. Thousands of years ago, they told us about this time, and we're in it. And it's biblical. It's, if you think about, that's one of the, the prophetic voices is the Bible. And I know that one more than I know the others, because I grew up in this culture that is, I grew up as a Christian. But all of them will point to the time when it gets darker and darker and darker and nastier and nastier. And it looks like we're just all going to go to hell in a handbasket. It looks like the extinction of humanity and the earth. And it's going to look like that. And that's what we're in now. And the phrase is always the darkest before dawn. It's the light, that all the darkness has to come out to reveal itself. And that's what's happening now, is things aren't getting worse. They're getting uncovered. And that's exactly what apocalypse means. The literal meaning of apocalypse is unveiling, uncovering. And so we're seeing some things, and we'll continue to see some things that have been going on for a long, long time covertly, that are now bubbling up because they've got no place to hide, because there's too many light workers here and too much positive energy, and they're not going to, and the dark, destructive, life-taking entities and systems and policies and aren't sustainable, and they're revealing themselves. But they will. It's like, hold the line. Just we have to hold the line. And it's always, it looks the worst. And then you say, can it get any worse? Well, it might. It might get even uglier. But it's the last gasp of things that aren't sustainable anymore, because we're evolving and saying that system doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. And the ones who want it to work because it benefits them are fighting with everything they have to make them work. Mm-hmm. And it's a war. Mm-hmm. And
Robin, sorry. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. But the camera is going to Robin, and so
sorry, I was just violently agreeing, or I should say peacefully agreeing with what Cathie just said. But I did want to ask Cathie you something. Early in the presentation, you said that Indigenous had, the meaning was embodied ancient memory, mm-hmm. which is so potent and powerful. And I don't remember your teacher or where you got that, or I'd like to read more or know more about that. Sort of yes. Like to do my investigation.
Yes, I highly recommend Martin Prechtel. It's Martin, Martin, and the last name is Prechtel, Prechettel.
Great.
I have everything he's written. He is a poet and an artist, a shaman. And to read that's my short answer. Read everything that he writes.
It's great. And then have you tied other, immediately the embodied part is I guess what really anchors that as being, it's just reverberating with me. Just quantum, or is there some other sources that you read that where you shake your head and go, yes, that's what Martine was talking about.
Yeah.
It's embodied, or,
Yeah. Well, definitely. If you get, there are references in my book to the ones, so the Barrios family. Let's see. Louise Hay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And how you can heal your body and how your body is attuned to that.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of who would be kind of a one-stop shop.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
I think you have 7 pages of references in your book. Sharon is pointing out. So, do you have the book, Robin? Cathie's book.
No, somebody said earlier. I don't know how I stumbled here, but I did today. So,
I see.
I'm happy. So it just came because it sounded great. So,
yeah. Well, if you get the book, there's 7 pages of references.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And one of the things I will mention, and I didn't know, I knew our DNA had something to do with this, that human DNA had something to do with this when I was writing the book. And I knew that had a great deal to do with ascension, that it was involved with some sort of change in our DNA. But I didn't know enough, and so I didn't mention it in the book. I've learned a lot more about our DNA since then. And so the reverberation, what you're actually feeling, the embodiment and the vibration that you're feeling, even as you hear me say that, is at the DNA level. And I don't know if I've heard for a number of years and from a variety of sources that we don't just have 2 strands of DNA, we have 12. And the other 10 are considered, are called junk DNA, or because they haven't figured out what the benefit of the other 12 strands are. They're inactive, they're dormant.
Oh, I have not heard that. That's astonishing.
Yeah, there you go. Do some research on that. And during this soul evolution and the practicing of the verbs and paying attention and doing that inner work and focusing on polarity integration and making that part of your belief system and living that way and managing your power and these things together will, as this helps us vibrate at a higher frequency, our DNA, it activates that dormant, it wakes up that dormant DNA.
Gotcha.
And so the goal that's one of the goals of ascension, and actually it's like both and. It's a goal of ascension, and it helps to cause your ascension is the activation of those dormant strands of DNA.
Fabulous. And I want to give you kudos for finishing the 2 wolves story. Because it takes you to a very different place than just, feed the white, which is upsetting. Feed the white wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I told an incomplete story for years. And Lynn finally learned the rest of it. It was like, a different meaning altogether.
I see that Lee has his hand up, but Lee, since you don't have your video on, would you just type your question into the chat? unless you want to turn on your video. And then we can read it and answer it, because that way we won't have a black screen on the record. Oh, there he is. Okay. What's your question?
Yeah, it would be too hard to. Hello. Thank you for the presentation. It's great to be around such teachings. I've been in Caritas for years, and I'm always speaking about community. I dub myself Mr. Community because in my life, I came up with this little theory. It's like a two-sided coin. One side is we're alone and we have our soul, and the other side is people, even our enemies, just everybody. And we need both, like both complement each other. And you spoke about a lot of profound topics and principles, working on ourselves, that we are works in progress. And, things do get hard. We get confused, or we don't know, and we can get lost in emotional little things and even big things. But I found that when we have community that is of that level where we could speak our truth, and we can be witnessed, it's very powerful. Because the question is, what is your experience, or have you written about the power of community?
So part of the soul evolution is, and I talk about this in the book, is the community. Our community starts before we incarnate, before we even incarnate here. When we make as spirits, as souls, that we in the company of other souls, and this is in a higher frequency, in a higher dimension, so we're in spirit form. And the decision to say, okay, for whatever reason, either I want to, or I'm being called to go back down to 3-dimensional living and a physical living, and go back and incarnate to Earth. And this is the reason that I'm making this particular journey for this particular life. And we don't just go, okay, and all the other souls are like, good luck, and you pack your physical bag and you come down and you're on your own. You actually we make contracts with other souls to go, I'm going to need your help to help me with this, and I'm going to need your help to help me with this, and I'll help you with this, and I'll help you. So we make agreements, and then say, okay, on 3, ready, go. And we meet each other. When we incarnate, we don't have that memory of it. We get that amnesia of it. But my point is, that's how encoded we are for the need for other people to help shape us. We told them so before we came here, and they help us with different things. And they are mirrors for us. They play roles in our life that help us learn valuable lessons for our soul to evolve. So, I just wanted to show, because I so agree with you that community is so needed. It's so important that it's formed before we even get here. Isn't that amazing? So every interaction we have with people, either it's just once, and the people that are the closest to you are the ones you contracted the most with to learn the most from. Good, bad, and ugly. It's pretty amazing, really. So thank you, Lee.
So in that way, then our angels are part of our community, because I think we have angels. So it's actually a pretty big community. Just opened my world up more than I.
There you go.
Just kind of help. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Sharon?
Yeah, thanks, Gloria. So I had a question. It sounds like Stephen Jenkins Orphan Wisdom School led you to a lot of other resources or teachers. So can you say a little bit more about how were you called to go to that school? How did that come about?
Stephen Jenkinson actually he helped start. He got his Master of Divinity at Harvard, and from there he went to help start a pediatric palliative care program in Toronto or Ottawa, I believe Ottawa. And his voice, the planning piece that he had was to look at that spiritual focus and to look square into the face of a death-denying culture and bring it to the attention of the whole healthcare system that will do work at all costs to keep someone alive. And because that was the work I was in a pediatric long-term care facility, I resonated with that. And so, he and I had that in common in terms of we're looking at kids who don't have a very good chance of survival. And so we have to look at death square in the face every day. That's the landscape of his life and my life and the people that we serve. And when I saw a flyer an email came across, and he was going to be in DC and showing his first, one of the major videos he has called Grief Walker. And I wasn't going to be able to go to DC. It looked fascinating. I was like, I really would like to see this I knew I couldn't go. So I went to his website and I read it nonstop and just said, I have to go sit in front of this man and listen to what he says. And that's his school. I signed up for one of his, it's 3 years, but we went, there were cohorts of 30 students, and we went for 5 days, a 5-day stretch twice a year for 3 years, and went to his out in the middle of nowhere farm. And that's how I found out about him.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think I've heard of him, and I've been to his website, but I never made the connection between you and him. So yeah. It's interesting what an influence he was.
And we actually brought him to Richmond a couple years. It was during that time that I was at the school.
Okay.
At his school, we actually brought him to Richmond, and he spoke at the Bird. We set it up at the Bird.
I'm sorry I missed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I have one other question, which I think is pretty simple. Do you have any resources for etymology that you would recommend?
The site, I go online, and it's
okay.
It's ETYM online.
Okay. Yeah, I've happened upon that. I just didn't know how reputable of a source it was, but you would recommend it?
That's the one I use.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's the best one. I mean, it could be all Wikipedia. I don't know, but it's led me down paths, and it's. Okay. I know there are print ones.
Yeah.
But my gosh, they must be like this.
Yeah, that's why I was curious what you would recommend. So it's online is easier. So if that's your source, then that's good for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Eleni has another question.
Yeah, I can say, Sharon, because of Greek and Latin that I'm connected with, that indeed it's coherent with those two languages. What Cathie said about etymology, about the Etymon online, but I wanted to say, Cathie, you said at some point that you may share with us maybe a 2-pager or speak to one of the Burbs, or I would be interested to hear from you a little bit.
Okay. We can do that. So I think breathe is a good start. It's a short chapter, and it's the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So breathe would be good. So this is the first verb, breathe. Breathing may seem so basic and so obvious that it doesn't really need elaboration. However, there are people for whom breathing is difficult. And for those of us who breathe easily, there is a tendency to take this bodily function for granted. Doesn't our breathing deserve a few moments a day of our undivided and reverent attention? Breathe comes from the word breath, and the original root of breath means to breathe or smell. Everything starts with breath. As the opening quote that I have an opening quote at the beginning of each chapter. This is especially true about human birth. The fetus becomes human when it leaves the water environment of the womb and enters the environment of air. What happens in that first breath? The word smell derives from a root meaning hot and is the precursor to smolder, which means burn and smoke without flame. And it also means to exist in a suppressed state, to burn inwardly. These words and phrases describe our condition during prenatal development. We cook into our fullest. The lungs are one of the last body parts to fully develop prenatally. And many a respiratory therapist in perinatal and pediatric intensive care units have stated about their tiny patients on ventilators, they just have to cook a little more before they can breathe on their own. Although not etymologically related, inspire comes from the Latin word spinare, to breathe, and spiritus, breath of life. To inspire means literally to blow into, to breathe upon. And figuratively, it means to excite and inflame. Before birth, our essence smolders within us, awaiting air. Our first inhalation ignites us and launches us into humanity. And each inhale thereafter, as well as each exhale counterpart, fans our flames. Respire comes from the same Latin roots as inspire. To respirate is to repeatedly breathe in and out, instinctively fanning our internal flames for the rest of our lives until we expire or breathe our last. Breathing, then, is not only a physiological process, it is very much a spiritual one. From an indigenous standpoint, the two are not separate. Whenever we breathe in, we draw the spirit into us and are enlightened by it. Native American author and artist Jamie Sams writes this: in the Native American culture, we are taught that the spirits ride the wind. Wind, found in humans, is called the breath. When we breathe air into our bodies, we are able to access the creative inspiration we need. Allowing spirit to use the breath to enter our physical forms is illuminating. Each time we inhale, we are inspired, literally and figuratively. Each time we exhale, we release the spirit in a form that has been changed, influenced by its momentary contact with our internal flames. And that expired air now becomes available for the next person's inspiration. Repeatedly and perpetually, we create with our very breathing. We create with our very breathing. When we inhale, we absorb the motion and thoughts of all around us, whose exhalations we're breathing in. So now you multiply this process by the number of respirations that each person performs daily, and then you multiply that by the number of people on the planet, and it becomes mind-boggling just how much inspiration is being circulated every day. As everyone knows, breathing is physiologically an involuntary action, meaning we don't have to think about breathing for our respiration to continue. And as a result, we often become lazy with our breathing, forgetting its miraculous process and taking for granted its life-giving power. Breathe.
Wonderful. Had not exactly a question, but when I was reading the third chapter on be fed, or feed, is it? No, be fed.
Mm-hmm.
I like the emphasis. I love the emphasis on being known for the role one plays in the community or village rather than on individual achievement. I love that distinction and that emphasis. And then later, when I was reading to learn, the chapter on learn, it occurred to me again in terms of, well, you write, to learn is a growth process, not an accomplishment. And I love that because I've always felt that our competitive style of education in the US, where the emphasis is on achievement rather than growth, and on who's the best in the class, who's the best, who got the best paper, who wrote the best paper, whatever, has negated the intrinsic value of education, so that we study to get a grade instead of learning for the sake of growing and evolving. Just that is so important. And I was happy to see that in your book, because I remember many years ago, I read that book, Education of Little Tree.
Mm-hmm.
You know that book? And he goes to this school, he's forced to go to this school. And when he knows an answer and the person the teacher calls on doesn't know the answer, he won't raise his hand, because for him to give the answer then would be shaming the other student, and he won't do that. And it's just this whole culture of, community and I just love that. So, I did have a question. The chapter on interdependence, I love that chapter too. I liked every chapter, but it made me think of Ubuntu in Africa. Are you familiar with that culture? Do you want to say something about
or that saying? No, I want you to. But I've heard that saying that something about my existence depends on your existence.
Yeah, I think the word, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Zulu word, and it means I am because we are.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I am, yes.
Yeah. And well, they have this, they're trying to replicate it now, this white, I think South African man, Michael somebody, I can't think of his last name, wrote a book on it, and has done a lot of lecturing, and different places on the globe are trying to replicate the idea of having a society with no money involved.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know there's someplace in Canada where they started this. It has to be a small village. And this was another question I had. When we talk about, how it takes a village, you mentioned that. I sometimes think, a lot of the indigenous practices and ways, I can imagine, when I imagine them, I think of a tribe or a small village. But I to have this connection with the people around us. But when you live in a metropolitan area, which thankfully I don't at this time, it's much more challenging to think in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you have any?
Yeah, the Malidoma Somé, his writings were very helpful to me. Have been very helpful to me to talk about that. He and I've referenced that. That's referenced in the book, and it's also I mentioned his name in the presentation. So if you can Google, you can look up his name on the internet, and you'll find.
Oh yeah, no, I know who he is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he in one of his books, he was even saying he recognizes that, and he says there's no way that we could return to that, even if we wanted to, and even if we physically could do it. The vibrations are all different now. The energetics are different. The frequency is all different now. And so we wouldn't be able to just step back into that past way of doing. So it's like, how do we carry forth? And that's kind of why that's kind of the point I was focusing on for this book, is to say, how can we take the best of this and translate it into a more modern existence? And he's a very good spokesperson for that, because when he was 6 years old, his family gave him to the missionary school, the Jesuits, and they trained him. They formally educated him and trained him, and he pretty much had to abandon his culture from the village the time he was 6 till the time he was 18, 19, something like that, where he ran away and ran back to the village. And, many years later, he ended up going through the tribal initiation ritual when he was like 22 with 12-year-olds, wow. 12 and 13-year-old boys, because he missed that ritual. He missed that and so when all was said and done, it was, you just read the story and your heart just aches. But he said, I am grateful for the experience I've had, because now I am multicultural. I appreciate and am grateful for both upbringings, because now I can be a bridge between those two cultures and talk to the Western-minded groups to tell them what I know about Indigenous ways, and talk to my Indigenous people about, there are some things about Western culture that could really benefit us, and to make those links. So he's really good to talk about that. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is our first instinct, is to go, okay, I'm going to build a cabin in the middle of the woods and not, a wood stove, and go back to living totally subsistent. And it's hard. And the good news is you don't have to.
That's the answer. I don't think that's the answer, but right. But it's like you say, we can learn. There's a lot we can learn from Indigenous cultures, because there are things that have been suppressed in Western culture that they still carry, right?
Yes.
But it's like Ken Wilber says, transcend and include, right? So
yes.
You don't go back. It's not about going back.
Yes.
It's about going forward and using that information. We can learn from the past, but we have to use it now. Yes. We have to use it going forward.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think we can, this Ubuntu concept really speaks to me, because I think there's just so much, so much damage that the whole concept of ownership and money and, all of that has done and continues to do. And, they haven't figured out how to do it on a wide scale, but there are places that are trying it out on a small scale. And it's not a barter system.
Okay.
It's just contribute. They also call it contributionism, where everyone contributes what they can, to in terms of what the village needs.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because it's been a while since I read the book, but I really like the concept.
Yeah.
I often think, in the spirit world, you don't need money. Why should we need money here? And we went for thousands of years without it, right? And
Yeah.
Makes for this dominator hierarchy, which is unhealthy.
There were other forms of what we call currency, I guess, and exchange. Yes.
Energy. Yeah. Time, energy. Sure.
And as we evolve as a species, I think we will eventually get to the point where money is not needed.
Yeah.
Again, there'll be other technology and other reasons why we don't need money.
Right.
Right now, we do need some. I mean,
we do. And even these places that are trying this, I mean, they have to start out with money because they have to buy the land and set it up and, but then they phase it out.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Anybody else have a question?
I have a comment, and this is it's kind of to throw it into the middle of the circle, but I've been following the revelations of the terrible situation of the Indian schools in North America, both Canada, U.S., and the cultural crisis that has occurred over a period of just 100 or so years, and the deaths of the children. And I have this feeling that it's no accident or coincidence that these revelations are happening now. And I was thinking back to the word apocalypse and the unveiling or the uncovering of this travesty. And I just wonder what you would say about that, Cathie.
It is a travesty, and that honestly, that is the way the main way. There are other ways, but that is the main way that I can take that in and bear witness to it and be just grieved by it. But to go to the 100th floor and say, it has to be revealed, and I'm glad it's being revealed. I'm just sick that it happened. But it would be worse if we never knew. And so we have to bear witness to these tragedies as they unfold and as they get uncovered, and grieve together as a community and as a country and as a world and as a people. Because those children are our children. And because that's not the only place in the world this has happened by any stretch. And we have to know it first and grieve just real hard about it and heal. And we can't, that is part of our soul evolution as well, is to say there are really dark things that have been happening and they're coming to the light, and we're just not going to do that anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you.
Natalie, in terms of what you said about watching the news and, feeling compelled to know what's going on, I feel the same way. And I wanted to share something that I saw that Richard Rohr said. He's a priest, a Franciscan priest, who is very kind of non-dual in his thinking. He's also a mystic. And he said, I watch the news to see who I need to pray for.
Mm.
And I thought that was a beautiful way to look at it. You know, that's a good way,
Yes.
a good reason to watch the news, so that we can, you know, it makes the hard thing is to feel helpless, but we're not helpless. Mm-hmm. Because if nothing else, you know, we can add our prayers and, you know, think about what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon, you had a question?
Yeah, I love that you use the phrase bear witness. It's a concept or a phrase I've been drawn to probably for a year or two now. So I just kind of light up every time I read it or hear it. So I just was wondering, in the context of everything tonight, could you say a little bit more about what that phrase means to you, and so forth?
The meaning of my life, I'm using as an example, is made by the relationships I have with other people. And that includes other people seeing me and hearing me and bearing witness to me being here and bearing witness to my life events and my joys and my sorrows. Because our lives are relational. And that's part of being in relationship with other people, is being present for events and situations in their lives. And some of them are beautiful and some of them are really, really, really hard. And the beautiful ones are easy to and fun to attend, right? But the harder parts are maybe more in need even of the bearing witness, because sometimes it's hard to do. It's the human version of if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does it make a sound? You know, that's the human version of bearing witness is that I need someone to know that I am here and that I make a difference in the world. And yeah, that's why I picked people before I even came here. That's why every one of us did.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you, Sharon.
I recently read a limerick on that koan, if the tree falls in the forest. And I think it's by someone named George Berkeley. He said, there once was a man who said, God must think it exceedingly odd if he finds that this tree continues to be when there's no one about in the quad. Dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I'm always about in the quad, and that's why the tree will continue to be since observed by yours faithfully, God. If objects depend on our seeing so that trees unobserved would cease treeing, then my question is, who is the one who sees you and assures your persistence in being? Dear sir, you reason most oddly. To be is to be seen for the bodily. But for spirits like me, to be is to see, sincerely, the one who is godly. That was very good. Well, it's been a pleasure. And I thank you so much, Cathie. I believe we're out of time, but it's really been delightful to listen to your words and your ideas and contemplate our homework going forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
The old teacher never dies. She just keeps giving homework. So,
And thank you for all who attended, and we'll see you next time.
thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you,
All blessings
Cathie.
on you.
Thanks, Gloria.
Thank you, Cathie.